Hey everyone, it's Presley at ActOutGames.com here, and today we're going to be talking about a very serious issue which is net neutrality. So, to start out, I guess we'll talk about what is net neutrality.
Sure.
And net neutrality is a law, I guess?
Yeah.
That was...
Regulation.
A regulation that was passed a while ago that means if a company is providing you access to the internet, it is providing you access to the whole internet, and it can't, block certain sites or anything like that. It's just giving you access to the internet, and they should not have to care whatsoever about what you're doing with the internet. It's just you have access to the internet as a whole.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, that's certainly a big chunk of what people talk about when they talk about net neutrality,
Yes.
right? Is that internet service providers, and specifically sort of last mile providers, they are selling you, ones and zeros.
Yeah.
Right? They're selling you bits that flow through their tubes.
Yeah.
And they should not care about what those bits turn into when they reach your house.
Right.
Like some of them will be your TV service, and some of them will be videos, and some of them will be email, and some of them may be different things, but they're all just ones and zeros that are flowing through their tubes. Mm-hmm. And so they say, okay, you can have this many per month at this cost, or you can pay X amount per megabit, whatever, and then you can have them at this speed. And whatever you push through the pipes that meet those two criteria, that's fine. I don't care what the bits are. I'm just selling you bits per second or a certain number of bits or megabits or gigabits per month, right? Mm-hmm. And you shouldn't be in the business of content. So the neutrality piece of it is content neutral internet delivery, right? Doesn't matter what the content is. It's just they're selling you access to the ones and the zeros, right? Yep. As long as it's lawful content, right? That said, the actual sort of regulations for net neutrality is 300 pages long.
Oh, wow.
And dives into a lot of other sort of sub-controls and regulations. So there's a lot in, when we say net neutrality, and we just mean that internet service providers should be content neutral. Mm-hmm. That's one thing. But there are, to be fair, there are 300 pages of regulations that I haven't read I haven't read many of them, in the law. And so I think one of the things that makes people skeptical about these kinds of laws is that it doesn't take 300 pages to say you should be content neutral in your data delivery. Yeah. Right? Like that could be a one-page law. Mm-hmm. That would be nice and sort of accommodate what people are talking about, right? And so, yeah, I think a lot of people agree with the idea that the internet service providers should be content neutral. Mm-hmm. But there may be other stuff that's in the net neutrality regulation as it exists now that is overburdensome for the providers, potentially, to be able to do that one thing. If that's the one thing we want to do, let's write a regulation that does that one thing. Mm-hmm. Is what I don't know, I playing sort of devil's advocate, right? And I have to draw a line. We have this conversation a lot, right? I draw a line between what I think is a good idea and what I think is good for me and what I think even is good for a company to do, and what that company should be forced to do by the government. Yeah. Like if a company wants to run a crappy business, it's their right to run a crappy business. Right. Right? Or if they want to run a business that I think is crappy, but they think is good, that's their business.
They can do that.
They can do that, right? And if a cable company wants to say, hey, we're going to charge you 10 times as much for the internet access that you use to access YouTube as we do for the content, the internet access you use to access something else, that's a dumb business plan, but okay, you can run a dumb business plan. Right? And the part of that doesn't necessarily work in this case is that is true in a world of competition. Yes. Right? So where we live now, we have one option for internet service. Right? And so if our internet service provider decided to do that, we couldn't switch to someone else who didn't do that.
Yes,
like
that
we
is
only
a problem.
Have one. Yeah, so that's sort of a monopoly that's built in. And so in the quick little research I did for this conversation, it looks like around 30% or around a third of people only have one internet service provider, and about another third of people only have two. Yeah. And they're two big ones, like one telecom usually and one cable company that do that, like AT&T and Comcast would be like the two that you get. And so there's not a lot of competition available in the internet service world that makes it where if one person does something dumb, I can just go do business with somebody else. Like a competitive marketplace, which should take care of these things, doesn't work when there are monopolies in place, right? And so for people who are fans of the open market and allowing like capitalism to rule, it's totally fine, but it doesn't work in the way that this world works right now, because I only have one internet. I can't go somewhere else.
Yes.
Right? The other thing I think about a lot is like cell phones. And they do some interesting things that are sort of analogous to what's going on here. One is, if you have a cell phone, you pay for a certain amount of data per month.
Yeah.
Right? And some cell phone providers will say, hey, we're not going to count Netflix in your hours. So you have, or your data, right? You have 4 gig of data that you can use every month, and any movies you stream from Netflix don't count against that 4 gig. So in effect, they're free.
Yeah.
Is that wrong? Should they not be allowed to do that? Because they're doing exactly what we're talking about with net neutrality. They're favoring Netflix content and making it cost more to watch a YouTube video than it does to watch a movie on Netflix, because they're giving it away for free. So do you think that, and that's happening right now?
Yes.
Do you think that should be illegal for the cell phone companies to do?
I don't think you should be able to do that, just because, like, that means you probably have, Netflix is probably paying you extra.
Of course they are. Of course they are.
Netflix is paying you extra to get their thing, and that is not.
Well, so like, what if this is the kind of the deal, right? Let's say that all the people who watch Netflix on AT&T's network, I'm just throwing company names around here. I'm not saying any of this is like the actual company. So let's say AT&T, everybody who watches Netflix on AT&T's network for a month spends $1 billion a month. Again, just throwing numbers around. Let's say it's $1 billion a month, and Netflix just comes out and says, "Hey, we're going to cover that $1 billion." Right?
Yeah.
So that these people would pay you $1 billion to watch our stuff. We're just going to pay you the $1 billion ourselves, and so don't charge them.
Right.
We're going to pay it. So the bill gets paid as far as AT&T is concerned. I don't have to pay for Netflix traffic, and everything kind of comes out of the wash. And so your argument would be that should be an illegal agreement.
Well, like, the thing with that is that's not what I'm describing. Like, that is Netflix personally. Like, that you are I would think that would be, instead, you are billed for Netflix, but Netflix is paying that for you.
Sure.
And that's a different matter than Netflix is paying AT&T extra money to have like a faster free connection. Just like, instead of covering people's money, covering people's bills.
It's a little different, but it's pretty subtle. I think the differences there are pretty subtle. But so I think in that case, one of the key differences is I can switch to Verizon.
Yeah.
Like, there's this whole like physical infrastructure piece of cable. Like, there are cables, or internet access at least. There are cables, there's fiber optics, there are all of these things that actually run into your house that bring that access. And only certain people can use those lines.
Yeah.
And only certain people can run those lines. And so when you're on a wireless network like cell phones, the competition is there because I can switch to another provider. Because it's not as difficult as it is to have somebody else come and run a cable into my house, or lease the cable from its current owner, or like even like the whole rules and regulations about who can run lines across the telephone poles. And it's ridiculous. Like the complexities of all of that are why this is such a big problem, right? I think what I would personally like to see is there's this thing called the last mile.
Okay.
This is a really sort of in the weeds conversation about this stuff, but it's good for you to know.
Yeah.
So there are things like huge tier 1 networks, the people who are really the backbone of the internet, that most of the internet travels across these things. And then there's kind of tier 2 providers, which a business could buy access from one of the tier 2 providers, and they would just take that traffic and pass it to one of the tier 1 providers. And so if you have, a website over on this provider and a user over on this provider, then there are these places called exchanges. So PAX, right? The conference? Yeah. So the X in that is an exchange. Those are all sort of around exchanges, right? And so, whatever, they're called internet exchanges. Don't worry about it. They're internet exchanges. And so, like, all of these providers basically just run a bunch of cable into this one building, and packets that come from this network that need to go to that network, they come and then they come and go into this building, and they switch to this other provider. And when it comes back, it switches to this other provider and goes over here. Yeah. So all these exchanges happen, and there's usually like this just shared agreement between all of these providers that say, hey, if I've got some traffic that's bound from your network, if you'll carry it, then I'll do the same for you. If you've got packets for me, I'll carry them, and that's sort of the open internet piece, right? And so all this stuff happens, but then there's stuff called the last mile, which is the wires that run into your house.
Yes.
Right? So there's all these little things, and there's ownership, and who pays to have those installed, and who owns them, and who can pass traffic over them, and all of this is really just to get you to those exchanges where data moves back and forth, right? I think what I would like to see is for the last mile stuff to be a utility, to be like municipally owned, like the city or the state or the government is responsible for getting data from the exchanges to my house.
Okay.
So that stuff is just sort of taken care of, and I have a connection into an exchange where all of the providers have access, and from there I can switch my data. I can work with any of the providers that I want to.
Okay.
And so that opens up connectivity, or opens up competition,
Yeah.
and allows me to work with whoever I want to work with, right? So that's one argument that I think would probably work relatively well, other than now you're relying upon the government to run these fiber or copper or whatever they're going to run, and you got to rely that they're going to do a good job. The other thing I think that probably brings competition in is if we ever really move to like wireless distribution of cable and home internet access, like the way we have cell phones now. If those things ever get fast enough and reasonable enough so that you no longer have to run wires into your house, I could just work with AT&T or Verizon or whoever I wanted to work with to have internet access, and there's true competition in place. I don't think you need as many regulations like net neutrality in place because people can compete.
Yes.
In the absence of that, though, it does seem like a reasonable thing to say,
Net neutrality should be there.
yeah, you charge me for bits. You shouldn't care what those bits are.
Yes.
Right? But I don't think it takes 300 pages to say that. I think you could probably do that in a little bit of a thin down fashion. Right? I saw a really good like post, I think it was on Twitter, where like Comcast posted like we will never favor one type of content over another type of content. You know, don't worry about it. Like, this is not what we're trying to do. We won't do this kind of thing. And somebody responded, and it was like, yeah, we would never do that thing, but it's really important we have the rights to do it.
Yeah.
And we promise we'll never do it, but you should totally give us the ability to do it. Even though we're never going to do it, we want you to pass this rule that lets us do it. Like, that's really just kind of a dumb argument to say. And like, the problem is the people who are against net neutrality have not come out and clearly said, here's what we think reasonable regulation is. Here's what we think we should be able to do and what we shouldn't be able to do from like a legal standpoint. And look, I don't mind the whole thing. Like if Comcast came out and said, look, I don't mind the whole thing about all the bits should be treated equally on the internet and you should be able to access any site that you want to, that's fine. But there's this other stuff in the other 299 pages of that document that's terrible and we don't like it and that should go away. So if you want to pass a law that says just this piece, then totally fine, I'm okay with that. Like, they're not saying that. They're just saying, just trust us, it'll be fine, we won't do anything bad. And the FCC, who's overseeing some of this stuff, is sort of saying, yeah, you don't need, like, this law is in place right now to prevent people from doing bad things. What we want to do is step back, and when somebody does something bad, we step in and stop them.
Okay.
So instead of, like, passing a law that prevents anyone from doing anything creative, is what they would say, or innovative. I guess that's probably what they would say.
Yeah, they're saying innovative right
now. We should wait and watch what people do, and when someone does something that's truly anti-competitive, we will step in and do something about it. Again, it's trust us. Like, don't worry about it. We don't need a law that says no one can do anything, that has to follow all these 300 pages of laws. We'll watch, and if somebody does something really anti-competitive, like, you know, AT&T buys Netflix, and then Netflix is super fast and you can stream movies and you can't watch YouTube or Amazon Video, and all those things get shut down on all of AT&T's networks, the FCC is saying we would step in then and make and fine them and whatever. We would regulate them.
Regulate.
Right. So, yeah, I don't know. Like, that's a pretty dumb argument too. Right?
Yeah.
It seems like there's got to be some middle ground where, like, the concept of net neutrality that people talk about when they mean net neutrality, which is all bits are created equal and should be treated equally across all these networks, and you shouldn't charge one person more for their bits than somebody else, totally fine. No problem with that. I don't think it takes 300 pages to say that.
I don't either. Right.
So you did a bunch of research on the topic.
Yes.
What did you come up with?
So what we're currently talking about is the fact that this might be repealed soon, which
like a couple of weeks.
Not a good thing right now, because that means that, like, even like what we're saying is that companies would then have the ability to I think it means they will not have the ability to stop connections, but they will have the ability to slow them down until they are unbearable to use.
Yeah, I don't know that they would even not have the ability to block them if they wanted to.
That might be a thing too. Like, but they can slow down. Like, say we have that you want to watch YouTube, and like, okay, so that's a different concept. Hold on, let me see.
Like Presley just got some press-on nails, and so she just has no idea what to do with her hands.
I know.
She's like Ricky Bobby, and I don't know what to do with my hands.
I'm trying to hide one that fell off earlier. Also, I need to put it back on. But it's okay. And these are also not trimmed yet. I just got them.
So you did some research and you saw what now?
Woo. Okay. So that will give companies, first of all, it will give them the ability to slow down connections to sites that don't work with them well.
Right.
Like Netflix, because Netflix obviously takes a lot of data to stream.
Yeah, but I mean, it's true that Netflix streams a ton of data, but they pay for the bandwidth that they use, and we pay for the bandwidth that we consume. So we're paying for the bits.
Yes.
Already. Like,
right.
What's the difference? I don't know why it matters.
Either. It just like a lot of the bandwidth that the internet companies have is consumed by Netflix, and I don't understand it either. But that's one of the arguments I've heard, is that there's so much Netflix going on that we just don't want to carry Netflix very fast anymore. And I'm like, cool.
Like, I mean, I think it makes sense if you hit a point where, like, you're filling up the tubes.
Yeah.
Right? And so there's so much Netflix that other stuff can't get through. And at
That's
that point,
not true.
No, I know. But I'm saying it makes sense when it gets to that point. And you have to make decisions about what traffic gets through and what doesn't get through, and you have to throttle some things to let some other things through. Like, those kinds of decisions have to be made when the pipes are full. Right? But they're not. So yeah, you don't have to make those decisions yet. You do, like, maybe you have to beef up some infrastructure so you can sell some more stuff. But this is where people sort of get into the internet service provider's business and say, hey, you should be super happy that we're consuming all of this bandwidth, and you've got to go build more so you can sell more and make more money.
Yeah.
Right? And that's kind of Comcast business. Comcast doesn't want to do that. They don't have to do that.
Right.
Like, that's their thing. They can run their business in a bad way if they want to.
Right. But we still don't really have a choice to that.
Yeah.
But anyways, if Comcast does, for some reason, not like Netflix, Comcast can, like, say Comcast
if they
is now
launch a competitor.
Yes, if they're partnered with Hulu or something like that, they can slow down Netflix or like block it entirely so that people have to use Hulu, and they can turn off YouTube and all of these other streaming services, so that the only option available is what they're partnered with.
Yeah.
And they can sell the internet in packs. So that means that you can have the entertainment pack, and you would have to pay extra to use certain services instead of the entire net being like what the big net neutrality thing that people talk about is that net neutral, like all the data on the internet you can use, you just have to pay for the whole internet. But if net neutrality is repealed, that means that you have to pay extra just to get certain websites. And that will actually do a lot of damage to small content.
Yeah, well, here's what other people would say, though, right? And the counter argument, the devil's advocate claim to that would be that, in theory, let's say Comcast is selling the social media bundle and the online video bundle and the email bundle and the web browsing bundle, right?
Yeah.
As different things. So what Comcast would say is, if you add all of those things together, you would be paying the same that you're paying right now for the whole internet.
Cool and good.
But you're this person who doesn't really care about social media would have cheaper internet access because they're not paying for social media. Right. Or this company that just wants email would just pay $5 a month and just be able to do email. But this person's fine with that. So why should this person have to pay for all of the internet when all they want to do is send and receive email from their grandkids? That's their counter argument.
That would be really cool if that was the case. Right. I don't think that is the case, because I think the internet companies want to, they have the money you pay, like right now, is to access the internet. Right. And then if you also want to access social media, you can do that. And then companies can also, and this is just kind of corrupt capitalism, woohoo, companies can pay the Comcast to have their sites go faster.
Right.
So, and that will absolutely kill smaller sites.
Yeah, and
Like-
for me, like it doesn't make a lot of sense to say, hey, if you only want email, yeah, it should cost less than if you want. It doesn't work anymore as the way it used to. But if you only want to do email, it should cost you less than if you wanted to stream a bunch of video, right? And that used to be true because we really used to pay for like how much data we used.
Yeah.
And so the person who used email would use a lot less data than the person watching videos, and so they would pay less.
Yeah.
Right. But now we
That's
sort of
understandable.
pay like this flat monthly fee.
Yeah.
For as much as you can consume at this speed, basically, over the internet. And so now everybody is kind of paying the same, and the person who just wants to do email is paying the same as the person who, does a lot of online gaming or streams a lot of video. I'm not sure how fair that is.
Right. I feel like that would be cool and good if you wanted to have these certain packs, but the problem is I don't think that's the case with what companies, because like a lot of this seems to be the companies want to make more money.
So should we go back to charging based on usage? So
That
people
would
who
be
use
cool.
use a
I
lot of
like
data
that
pay
idea.
more than people who don't use much data?
That is a cool idea, and that is the way things used to work, and I don't understand why they changed it. Probably because they wanted more money.
Well, they're also like the people who are just watching email are subsidizing the people who are streaming a lot of video. Subsidizing. They're paying part of, like it used to be this person paid $10 and this person paid $90.
Yeah.
So the company made $100 a month. And so now they're like, hey, we'll just charge you both $50 a month. And so we still make $100, but you guys are paying the same now. But the usage is really kind of skewed. And so now this person's paying for $40 worth of stuff they don't want, and this person got a $40 break in their bill.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's not usage based anymore.
Right. So that's just like, yeah, I think it should be paid for, and I thought that's how it works.
It's like a consumption fee.
Yes, like a consumption fee. So then the company still would make money,
Right.
and that would just be fair that time. And then you would need, I still feel like net neutrality. What happens to the smaller sites if you buy bundles of sites? Like what
Well, it
happens?
just depends. It's the whole, like, this is a big thing when you're setting up networks and you're restricting content in some way, right? So you have this concept of, I only allow the things I green light, like the whitelist or blacklist. I only allow the things that I approve in this bundle, in which case tiny sites would just be out of business.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to go through and approve every site on the website. Versus the blacklist, which says, here, you get everything except these 5 things unless you pay for them, which is probably what they would have to do.
Okay.
And if they do it that way, then it doesn't really hurt the smaller sites as much
Yep.
because they would be allowed through. The one thing to kind of wrap up, because we're kind of we're talking a lot about this, is the idea or the question of if internet access is a utility now. Right, if it's such a core part of the infrastructure of our society, like water and electricity and gas, like heating, like things like that, if it's something that's so core to the day-to-day life of the citizens of this country that the government needs to say, okay, look, we need to regulate this and make sure everyone has access to internet in the same way that everyone should have access to electricity and to clean water. Do you think that internet access rises to that level?
Yes.
Like,
and
is
the
it
thing with
like
that-
Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which we talk about all the time?
Yeah,
Is that on the same level? Is internet on the same level as water now in Maslow's
For Presley
hierarchy of
it
needs?
is.
Yeah, right.
True, but that did not need to be that weird. That rude. Anyway, but yeah, like it is in this day and age, it is a need. It is like
Sure.
because like socialization is on that thing.
It
on
is.
Maslow's.
It
That
is.
is what socialization is now.
Right.
That is.
But I mean, I think a lot of times you need the internet to get a job. You need
Yes.
it to education. You need it.
That
Like
is
it's
why
core
it's
requirement for so
important.
many things. I would personally argue that the internet access is more important than phone access.
Yeah.
Now.
Oh, yeah.
I think they
Oh,
have
so
switched.
much.
And so if the telephone companies are going to be managed as a utility, then certainly I think the internet probably
yes,
has to be.
but the thing with that is
Because
you don't.
the least common used functionality of my phone is making calls.
Oh yeah, I have
by
texted.
far.
I text you guys occasionally, and
Well,
one
no, but that's
person
texting. That's not
maybe.
even phone. I mean,
Oh,
like
I have
calling
never-
someone
I-
on the phone and talking to them on
I
the phone.
literally don't think I have called anyone with my phone.
You're right. I mean,
Ever.
it's a yeah. So I think it's hard to argue against the internet access as a utility.
Right, and the thing with that, like, is there is no premium water. that you have to pay for.
Of course there is. We just bought a box. I'm going to tell you how much
No.
we paid for that box of water we just bought.
That is, well, it's not
But that's by
sparkling
choice.
water.
There's like a baseline.
But there's not like when you get your like for your sink and stuff.
Sure. No, like even when we go to a restaurant, they'll be like, "You want tap water? Because that's free, or I can sell you that bottle of water for $5." That happens all the time.
Yeah, no, not
But like
that.
across
But
the
in
tap. There's not like
Okay.
across in our kitchen sink. Like we can't go to the water company and say, "Oh, do you want the nice water or do you want the kind of brown smelly
because like
water?"
with your water company, like
Yeah.
we're talking about still utilities.
Yeah, the utilities.
Yes, utilities. There is no like, so you could pay for this dirty, probably gonna kill you water, or you could get the sparkly premium special.
But there are
water.
lots of like I mean maybe there is like a baseline that you set that says, okay, this everybody gets this and this is part of what we protect, and then if somebody wants to go beyond that, if Google wants to run fiber into your house, like we'll run the network and you got copper and everybody has this certain level of 40 meg of access performance, then maybe if Google wants to come run their separate thing and charge you more for gigabit internet, then they can do that.
Right.
Like maybe you can go above the bottom line, but the bottom line is protected and sort of insured and delivered as a
that might
utility.
work.
That might work too.
Yes.
I don't know.
Moral of the story: if you don't want it to not want net neutrality to be repealed,
Right.
there will be links in the description to where you can contact your reps.
Yep.
Because there is if you contact your reps enough, they probably will hear you. But like they'll hear you at least. They won't not do anything, but they'll hear you, and you can make a difference if there's enough of yelling directly into everyone's ear. It happened last time. I remember this happening like last year.
Right.
This happened last year. It happened last time. It worked, so we'll try it again.
Yeah.
It's getting really close. There'll be links in the description. For those of you who are there are several websites which there will be linked in the description where if you are not comfortable with talking on the phone, then there are websites where you will get like automated stuff. There's
Yeah.
websites that provide you with a script.
Yeah.
With anything you might need to contact the FCC.
And we'll
if
put
you
a
don't
couple of
want-
links down there of people who had a more intelligent conversation about this topic as
Yes,
well. So
because
you
we're
can-
just talking. This
Yeah.
just went off. Not
Yeah.
really even about net neutrality anymore. It's just about the internet. Period.
Awesome. All right, well, get us out of here.
So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.
Bye, guys.